Welcome back to TechNet Radio. It's IT time, and in today's episode, Blain, Barton, and John Baker welcome Senior IT Pro Evangelist Chou as they discuss the 5-3-2 principle of cloud computing. Tune in as they chat about what makes up the cloud, its delivery and deployment methods, as well as how one can easily get started in cloud computing today. Blain, the mic is yours.
Hello and welcome to IT Time Radio. I'm your host, Blain Barton, a Senior IT Pro Evangelist here at Microsoft. And today as well, I have John Baker, the co-host, Senior IT Pro Evangelist out of Atlanta. How you doing, John?
I'm doing fine. How's it going with you?
It's going well, thank you. We also have a special guest today, Chou. He's a Senior IT Pro Evangelist out of Charlotte, North Carolina. How you doing today, Young?
Hello, everyone. Hello, Blain. Hello, John. Hello.
So, Young, you've got 35 seconds to tell me everything I should know about the cloud. I'm just kidding. Tell me.
Well, I tell you what you can do is to turn around and look at outside the window.
Well, just tell me, I mean, we hear the cloud term bandied around by everybody these days. You even see it in commercials on TV. Tell me exactly, what does the cloud mean to you and what does it mean to Microsoft?
You know, that's a $60 million question. And
Okay,
in fact, I think it'd be pretty hard to come up with one statement and talk about cloud because the cloud really touches so much. And so if you go to internet, you see people talk about cloud. Some say it's an internet. Some say it's a remote access. Some say it's something with a data center. Some say scalability, reliability, all kinds of terms are thrown together, and that's cloud. It's almost like cloud can be anything and everything you think of. And I think the issue is really we need to kind of understand the fundamentals before you can really talk about cloud. And the fundamental of cloud is really what is cloud trying to do? This is almost like if you ask people saying, you know, what is a computer? And people are going to come up with all kinds of questions because computer really means a lot of things, right? For people, maybe a laptop. Other people, maybe it's a checkout machine. So if you ask me cloud, to different people, it's going to mean different things. So I think what we need to know is first understand what cloud is for, what cloud is about, right? Yeah. Cloud is really about the ability to deliver your business as a service, and this term service, quite frankly, it's been, in my opinion, abused so much recently. And you get to a point like everything is a service, and you use a service to explain everything, and you don't know what is a service anymore. But I think what we need to do is we need to understand the service concept because in the cloud, everything is really delivered as a service. So I guess my question to you, John, would you like to know what is a service?
Yeah, define a service, because again, even that means different things to different people, right?
That's right. And then, so what I'm trying to do is, as I talk about in my blogs and all that, is service is really representing a very simple concept. Service in the context of cloud means capacity on demand, which means when you need it, you can get to it. And that's also have a lot of connotation with it because on demand also means it needs to be globally accessible. It probably needs to be able to serve you in a whenever you need it, you need to be accessed, and whatever you want to do, right? Whatever you need to do, you will able to do it, and that also means it's more like a self-service type of model. And in order to provide you service on demand, provide you the capacity on demand, you probably need to have some type of optimization, automation, in place such that you can kind of optimize the usage of your resources. And in other words, you probably manage your resources as a pool, right? So we say resource pooling. You probably need to have something like that to be able to assign resource to user upon their request and take them back and reuse as needed. You probably need to have some type of mechanism such that you can grow. Because if the requests coming in, flooded requests suddenly coming in, and your demand increased like 3 times, 4 times, how are you going to fulfill that request? So you probably need to have some type of mechanism to allow you to do what we call elasticity, which means you can expand as you need it. And perhaps more significantly is when you don't need them, you can shrink a bit. And that has been very hard to do for IT. So cloud is something like you also need to have that kind of capability in order to provide your business as a service, right? To on demand, to globally, and all that. And finally, perhaps is something that's also very important is to have a business model to support it. And specifically, we're talking about pay as you go or pay per use, right? Because the on demand, because if you're going to let me use it whenever I need to, and if I have to pay it, for the whole time, then that doesn't make sense. So it only makes sense like I pay, the amount that I use and pay only when I use it, right? So there needs to be a business model to support this whole thing. So back to what our question is, what is a cloud? Well, cloud is to deliver your business as a service. And what is a service? Service means on demand. So combining together, what is cloud trying to do? Cloud is to give you the ability such that you can deliver your business on demand, right? So that's the whole concept of the cloud. And what I just went through were really the 5 characteristics of cloud computing, which is self-serving, the self-service model, the ubiquitous access, the global access of your resources, the resource pooling, the optimization, the automation of the system management, and also something we call elasticity that allows you to grow as needed. And like I said, perhaps more significant is to shrink it, right? When you don't need the resource, you'll be able to deallocate them and shrink it back. And finally, there needs to be a business model to support this whole thing, because when you implement cloud, when you access the cloud, when you get to your access, you only want to pay the amount that you use. So there's a business model supported. So there's your 5 characteristics of cloud. Now you hear people explaining cloud. Sometimes they say, software as a service, platform as a service, or infrastructure as a service. Now, once we understand the service concept, that becomes very simple and straightforward to explain. Because software as a service means software on demand, right? And software basically is an application. So your application, if you deliver through cloud, you can deliver as a service. You can make your application on demand. Platform as a service, platform means protocol, means API. Platform means a programming environment. Now this is a little bit interesting because Microsoft have a platform as a service offering called Windows Azure Platform. What it allows you to do is, using platform as a service, you can develop your application such that you can deliver your application using software as a service. So you use Microsoft provided Windows Azure Platform to develop your application, and then you can present it with a software as a service. Now finally, people also talk about infrastructure as a service. Infrastructure for IT pro, that means server, right? That means you are able to deploy server, or more specifically, you are able to provision your infrastructure, right? Deploying server on demand. That's what infrastructure as a service means. And so when people talk about software as a service, platform as a service, or infrastructure as a service, that is actually the 3 delivery method that cloud computing provide. So we talk about 5 characteristics, 3 delivery method, and you also heard people say there's a public cloud and there's a private cloud, right? And that's another part of the characteristic of cloud computing is there's a 2 deployment model. Public cloud basically means internet, right? So internet is always there. As long as you have a connectivity to internet, you can go to public cloud to access your resource. On the other hand, there's also so-called private cloud. Now, we use the term private because it's dedicated. So private cloud is a cloud, but it's a dedicated cloud to an organization. And now this doesn't mean it has to be on-premise. It could be hosted by third party, and so that can be off-premise. Although in most scenarios, people are talking about private cloud, assuming it's on-premise, because it's only natural that after you deploy the resource on-premise, now as we transition IT into the cloud computing era, that we kind of convert what we have deployed already into a cloud computing environment. So most people, when they talk about private cloud, they sort of assume that it's an on-premise deployment. Now for Microsoft, the private cloud piece are mainly focused on infrastructure as a service at this time. In other words, allows you to provision, to deploy server on demand, in your IT environment. So I talk about 5 characteristics: 3, delivery method, and 2, deployment model. That's kind of the core concept of cloud computing. So when you talk about cloud computing, it's not just internet, it's not just public cloud or private cloud, it's not just software as a service. It's really, there's a whole body of knowledge that you really need to consume before you're able to productively talk about cloud computing.
That's excellent, Young. Did you know where the word cloud computing actually originated?
Enlighten me.
Okay. Hey, how about this? The word cloud computing originated from the cloud symbol that is usually used by flowcharts and diagrams to symbolize the internet. The technology allows on-demand pool of applications and computing resources through the cloud, which is also known as the internet.
That's very interesting. In fact,
Wikipedia. That was Wikipedia, by the way.
In fact, the concept of cloud computing has been there for some time. I mean, we heard different terms, utility computing, grid computing, although they are not exactly the same. But the concept sort of, over this past 50 years, we went through mainframe computing, client server, and web, and software-oriented architecture. Finally, we come to together with all this experience and technology, we come up with this new computing platform called cloud computing. And basically, it's an abstraction. What cloud computing is really trying to produce is I give you an abstraction such that you don't need to know the complexity behind it, how we manage that, how we deploy that, right? But you as a consumer, all you care about is really the resources you need. Either you are IT pro, you need to access computing power, storage, or you are kind of the end user. You just want to get to your application so you can enter the data, or you can upload that picture, right? And so we kind of hide those complexity from you, but we give you the capability that you can access it on demand. So whenever you need the resources, it will be available. And that abstraction we call cloud computing kind of hides you from all the complexity behind it, how we deploy, how we manage, how we allocate the hardware, how we provide high availability, all that. And so it's a good thing. It's a good thing. And I think one interesting observation I have is people, and I think IT pro specifically, thought that once we go to cloud, some people say, we're going to lose our job or something. And I think that's probably because due to the lack of understanding the big picture of cloud. Because, like I said, there's really software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, right? If you just look at the software as a service, that a lot of times that's what people talk about cloud computing, because that's what they see, right? That's what they've been presented. And so people thinking about, okay, now wait, if I go to the cloud and then people can access the application, and then what do I do? Because nothing for me, IT pro, to do. Because I manage server, I deploy application. Then what do I do? Well, as a matter of fact, behind the cloud, there's also infrastructure, there's also operation, there's also platform that still need to be managed. And not to mention the transition of cloud, it's going to take a long time. For us to be able to transition or convert the on-premise data center into the cloud, kind of go through the ultimately put everything in the cloud, that's going to be a very, very long process. And also, depending on the businesses, maybe you don't need to go to the cloud all the way, right? Maybe you want some of your applications, some of your resources in the cloud, but not all of them. For instance, I am doing a cataloging business. I provide catalog information. I want this catalog to be accessible by all my users or anyone who needs the information, 24/7. You know what? Hey, you can put that in the cloud. Well, at the same time, you can still manage your other intellectual property that perhaps you don't want to share, you don't want to make it available. You can still put it on premise. So we see it's going to be for a long time. It's going to be a mixed environment. It's going to be some in the cloud, some on premise, right? And so for IT Pro, this is really a lot of opportunity to make that transition, to optimize your operation, to automate your process such that you will be pluggable. Your service will be pluggable. So if you need to go to the cloud, you can go to the cloud. If you need to stay on premise, you can stay on premise. Whatever is the best solution for you, and then you can use it, right? And so for IT Pro, I think there's just tremendous opportunity, particularly to manage a mixed environment that you have something in the cloud, or your partner is in the cloud, right? Or your branch office perhaps is in the cloud, but your headquarters is, everything's on premise. To manage that kind of heterogeneous environment, it's going to be, great challenge for IT Pro, moving from what we have today, everything's on premise, into kind of a heterogeneous and mixed environment. And that's going to be very exciting, and there's tremendous opportunity for IT pros.
How does virtualization make a play in the cloud? Because I know with private cloud, that's using virtualization, right? Hyper-V. How about with public cloud, or does that use it too? Absolutely.
Now, virtualization has everything to do with cloud computing, either your public cloud, private cloud, either your software as a service, platform as a service, or infrastructure as a service. Virtualization has everything to do with it. As a matter of fact, if you look behind the scene, if you look what's under the hood, how we implement cloud computing, it's actually a lot have something to do with virtualization. For instance, you deploy a virtual machine when people request the resources. So you deploy the virtual machine, and then install and configure the requested service and run it in an isolated environment in a virtual machine. And so virtual machine allow us, or virtualization instead allow us to quickly deploy resources out. And also, when you don't need it, all you have to do is just get rid of that virtual machine or get rid of that virtualized resources. So it really allows you to manage your resources much more efficiently and effectively. And so virtualization also gives you that independence from the hardware. So which you basically manage a file as opposed to really hardware, which really has a lot of issue in terms of how you can quickly deploy them, and perhaps, like I said, more importantly, to deallocate them, right? Because once you acquire them, you configure them, you deploy them, it's very costly, right? To decommission them, to reconfigure. I mean, all that is just next to impossible. So using virtualization, that allows us to use system management software to deploy very quickly, very efficiently, and also at the same time provide high availability, automatic deployment, what we call intelligent placement. When you need to allocate resources, we find the best environment, best computing environment to fit what you need, right? And then deploy the virtual machine accordingly. All that becomes possible because the virtualization technology. So virtualization has everything to do with it. Now, specifically for private cloud, we talk about infrastructure as a service. That's all about virtualization. That's all about the ability to deploy a virtual machine or your server, if you will, on demand. So that's right there, your infrastructure as a service.
Well, I've heard the term VM role, so deploying a virtual machine in the cloud. A lot of people get confused about that. Can you clarify exactly what a VM role is? Because it isn't really deploying a server in the cloud that you manage like a regular server, right? It's really a server that's deployed to run a stateless application. Is that correct?
Well, let me go back a little bit because I think you need some, we need to get some background in terms of what the VM role is about. Now, VM role is one of the compute role in Windows Azure platform. Let me qualify that. Windows Azure platform actually got three components. One is Windows Azure, SQL Azure, and Windows Azure Platform Application Fabric. Within the Windows Azure, which is basically the Cloud OS, within the Windows Azure, we have the compute service, we have storage service, and we have something called Fabric Controller. Now, within the compute service, it's basically the computing engine that Windows Azure Platform provides you. Within that, there's three different roles. Different role is basically different type of function that you can request, right? One is one of them is the VM role. The other two are web role and also worker role. Web role is like the web front end, right? The worker role is like the batch job type of thing, right? Okay. And so the VM role, what VM role provides is allows you to upload in the cloud the entire virtual machine. And this is not intended to be used as an infrastructure as a service, like you deploy a server. This VM role is really for you to customize, if you will, your application environment. Because what happened is in Windows Azure platform, when you deploy a worker role or you deploy a web role, there's only so much you have control, right? Because the runtime environment is provided by Microsoft. If you look at the architecture of platform as a service, what you can control is your application and data. But if you, let's say you have a requirement, you need a specific version of DLL, or you need specific Windows services running behind the scene, or your initialization of your service, of your application, takes forever, takes too long, which means, in the cloud, when we redeploy your service, that's going to take a long time. That's going to cost you a lot of money. Or simply your initialization process is not 100% reliable. Let's say out of 100 times, 95 times they're good, but the 5 times there's a possibility it will fail. That's not good when you're in the cloud, because when we redeploy your service, when we scale out, we would just redeploy your service, and your service needs to come up, right? And so if you have that type of scenario, the initialization is not reliable or takes too long, or you have specific runtime environments that you need to, have a very specific condition happen, you can use the VM role to basically customize everything, right? You can customize the runtime environment within that VM role, and then you can upload the entire VM role to the Windows Azure platform such that that you will get all the runtime environments, that you specified. It will be in place when you kick off the instance. And so that's what the VM role for. So it's really for you to have the ability to customize when needed your application environment. Now, I always tell people that you should try all these 30, 50 things that before you run to VM role. You should, basically, it's a last resort. You have tried everything else, and there's really, you cannot get what you needed. And so you can do VM role because it is a kind of relatively costly proposition, and also VM role means you need to maintain the OS. So Patch Tuesday will still be meaningful to you, and you will need to maintain the runtime environment yourself, which kind of defeats the purpose to use cloud computing.
If a customer's thinking about doing something in the cloud right now, is it fairly easy for them to work out what might be a cloud, not qualified, but a cloud eligible application, and then put it in the cloud for testing?
Very good question. Very good question. As a matter of fact, I see the low-hanging fruit for on-premise application to migrate to cloud is the front end. If you have a standard kind of 3-tier type of application, you have front end, middle tier, and the back end, the front end is the best candidate to migrate to the cloud first, assuming you have done, you have to do your homework. So you engineer your application, you separate your data and application logic and all that. So your front end should be fairly stable and static, right? And that's the best candidate to put in the cloud. Why? Because once you put it, let's say you use Windows Azure, right? Then and you use the web role, you put it in the front end, and you use Windows Connect or something to, kind of integrate it with your on-premise application. If you do it that way, once you put it in the cloud, Microsoft will automatically make it highly available. All the data you put in will replicate 3 times. So you will have a highly available computing environment and with high reliability. Now, which means you no longer need to do load balancing in your front end, because we're going to automatically make it high available and load balance for you. And you don't need to do anything other than, upload to the cloud. And so no longer you need to set up duplicate environment for the clustering and all that kind of stuff, plug in cable, or set up the front end, do all round robin to do the load balancing. You never need to worry about that. So the front end is really the best candidate, and that would be something that I encourage enterprise to kind of investigate that. And if you want to go to the cloud, that will be the first thing I try. And I think that's a good starting point to kind of transition into cloud. And in terms of like to test it, to try it, Windows Azure, and we have this what we call free pass, and I'm sure if you just go to Microsoft.com and search Windows Azure free pass, or simply just go to our Evangelist website, we all have that information to provide you. You can get like a free 30-day trial without credit card. Go ahead and try it yourself and use Visual Studio and install the Windows Azure SDK, and you can quickly deploy a sample, a hello world type of thing, hello Windows Azure type of application to the cloud, and experiment, how you can increase the instance, decrease the instance, how you can kind of manage this whole thing with a certificate, do a secure deployment, things like that. And I think, once you try that, it will click very quickly. It's like, wow. This is amazing, now I can do this without owning a single piece of hardware, without plugging in a single cable, and now I can have an application in the cloud and with high availability, with the low balancing, all that without to physically do anything other than, put your application in the cloud. So I think that's a very attractive proposition. Now, I do need to say that, IT Pro, you do need to kind of do a thorough analysis in terms of the cost, because in the cloud, many things now, perhaps previously when you do on-premise computing, are never think about cost of that, but now in the cloud computing, they can become a costly operation. For instance, your diagnostics, right, and your backup restore, right, things like that. Where you're going to put it, your secondary storage. I mean, things like that, right? When you have on-premise computing, your network share, your local storage is cheap. Now in the cloud, everything you have to allocate, particularly the storage. If you want something that's persistent, that you have to explicitly allocate the storage, that can cost you money. So you really need to think about how you can optimize your operation, right? You can basically kind of do the most with the least, the fewer operation you need, and really optimize the whole thing such that you can put your stuff in the cloud but still have a really good return on investment.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. That was a great interview, Young. And, of course, always having Baker on as the co-host. Once again, that was talking about cloud computing, the 5-3-2 ladder, if you will. With that, thanks for being on the show today, Young.
Thank you.
All right. That's a wrap for IT Time Radio. I'm your host, Blain Barton. Join us next time. Thanks a lot.